Hi and welcome to Beef Butchery. Today we're going to start working on a top round, which is found on the top part of the hind quarter or the hind leg of the cow. So many of you guys have a piece about 2 1/4 to 2 3/4 pounds, and I have kind of an end piece. So I chose this because it's a little bit messier in the form of having some connective tissue and some fat cap. So when I purchased this, I bought a top round cap on piece of meat. So if you look at this piece of meat, and yours might look a little bit different based on where it might have been cut off at the top round. Some of you guys got a center cut. You can distinctly see two totally different muscle groups here. Whenever there's a muscle group change or a group of muscles, you can actually see the direction that the muscle or the fibers of the meat is running, and you'll see here where it changes a little bit. And then in between those two groups, you're going to see connective tissue. Connective tissue is in the form of either collagen or elastin. When we cook foods, the way we're going to cook it today, things like collagen are going to break down with a low and slow cooking method, but things like elastin, also known as silver skin, because it has that bluish silver look, does not break down. It almost, no matter how long we cook it, always has a rubber band-like taste and texture to it. So I'm first going to remove some of this fat cap just to get it a little bit leaner. But there's really nice flavor in this too, so I don't want to remove too much. I just want to make sure there's no large silver skin pieces holding it in. And quite honestly, I don't see much, just a little bit right here. So I'm going to remove that fat so you can see it. And the only other way to deal with silver skin, if you're not going to cook something low and slow, is to cook the meat, a more tender cut of meat, leave it on there, but you got to cut it really paper thin. But ideally, chefs want to get this off. So if you can see that, that's actually got a bluish silver shine to it, and that's what holds the fat onto the layer of meat down below it. There's never going to be anything, there's never going to not be some type of connective tissue holding muscle groups together or fat onto meat. Okay? So I'm just going to trim this little bit off. So I've got my butcher knife here, and I don't want to waste the meat, so I'm just going to get it right up underneath that silver skin piece and trim towards it, so I'm not cutting too much into the meat. You want to take as little meat as possible off on this, and that's kind of what you're looking for. You can even get a little bit cleaner like you see right here. It's not too bad all the way through this. It's not overly thick. It starts to get a little bit thinner here. I can see the meat through it, so I'm going to leave the remainder of that on. So in addition, as we start to break this down, I'm going to cut it first into a roast, and then I'll have some other loose pieces or pieces that are not as nice to cut down for stew. So we're preparing this, we could roast this piece of meat as is, and then serve it as a roast beef, sliced very, very thin. Couldn't serve it in large pieces, or we're going to do a braising technique. So this is your introduction where dry heat cooking methods meet moist heat cooking methods, and it's called combination cooking. So simply we're just going to take, and we're going to look at this, and I'm going to cut it a large piece, a large chunk for a pot roast here. So I've got my chef's knife just cutting straight down, trying to cut it fairly even. You can see there's a little bit of fat in there, and I'm not too concerned, about that large piece of fat here. But there is a little bit of vein here that I'm going to pull out because that will not have a pleasant mouthfeel. Whenever I'm trimming around the muscle groups or I'm trying to get underneath some of these layers, your boning knife is designed to do that. Obviously boning knife also because it's designed to go around the bone on the meat, work around the ball joints and the tips. So we have this piece here, and traditionally we would be doing pot roast from a piece of meat such as chuck. And chuck has a lot of connective tissue. It comes up from the shoulder, and like we talked about in class this week, connective tissue is very prominent in areas where the animal moves a lot or there's joints present. Same thing, I'm just cutting out the vein. I'm going to leave a little bit of fat in there. The fat's going to add flavor. I don't want to have like really rubbery, chewy pieces of fat in my finished product, but a little fat's fine. Okay? And because we're doing a dish where the meat's going to fall apart a little bit, I'm not going to tie this together. If I was going to sear this and try to cut it like a steak, I would bring a piece of butcher twine in and trim that up. And then now we're going to go ahead and take this remainder piece that has a lot of connective tissue and cut that down into some stew meat. So if you see here, I've now got this into 3 different muscle groups. I'm going to basically cut through these muscle groups, and in order to do that, I'm going to just use my fingers to kind of open it up a little bit and use the tip of my knife here to get the muscle groups separated. And I don't really need to cut into it too much. I'm just going to let the tip of the knife do the work. And I'm just trying to get some of the excess fat off. That's really pretty much it. So if you make a cutting error on your meat, don't worry about it. It's going to go into your stew meat, okay? You want to get the meat similar in shape and size. It doesn't have to be perfect for stew. Stew is really a utilization dish. So I've got this down fairly clean, a little bit of fat here and there. I'm going to take just a little bit more of this off. This looks fairly clean. Any kind of veins or anything, and you guys really shouldn't be contending with too many of the veins. I just kept kind of the vein end piece of the meat so you could see that, and you wouldn't have to deal with that so much. You can just kind of cut straight forward for the first time. So from here, I'm just going to take these pieces, cut them in some nice cubes, and that will be for stew. And cut it based on what you're doing. You can have smaller pieces, they're obviously going to cook faster. The stewing technique takes some time. We're cooking it low and slow to try to get rid of the chewiness in the meat and break down those connective tissues. And the same thing for the pot roast. So the thicker you cut the meats, the longer the cooking time is going to be. You gotta cook this meat until it gets nice and tender. Top round will get a little bit tender faster than something like a chuck will or a bottom round. Okay. So we're going to put this in a pan for our stew meat. We'll set this aside for later video, and we'll set this in this pan as we're going to go into the braising technique.